everyone. Josh Taylor here. Thank you so much for being part of our third episode of the CE podcast. So today I really wanted to get into what everyone's been asking me since the intro. They had no idea that once upon a time I was not a science-based positive reinforcement dog trainer. So everyone wants to know how that happened, why it happened, why I believe what I believe, even though it's, backed up science, which means that there's studies. But nonetheless, so people wanted to know exactly where all of this came from, how it came to be. So I wanted to kind of get into that a little bit. So let's go with this. First off, when I first started dog training, we always focused on what we didn't want. And I think that was really hyper-focused on in the dog industry. I don't like this. My dog does that. Or I don't want my dog to do this. It was always about the bad stuff. And there was very, very little focus on the good stuff. In fact, I've been doing this again 18 years. When I first started learning and following the people I was following and working where I was working, a place in Laval. When I started doing research, I noticed that it was pretty much all the same. I can think of tons of others that were probably around 18 years ago that, I just, my mind was so condensed, right, into this field of like, this is how we do things. But, Sophia Yin comes to mind, like legend. Dr. Ian Dunbar was probably one of the only people that I did notice from an online platform that was around, that was science-based, that was positive, so to speak. And I remember, as naive as I was back then, I definitely kind of shrugged that off very quickly. It wasn't something that really connected to me. And now, honestly, I think I've watched everything from him from the beginning a billion times. I love him. I think I have every book of his. Dr. Ian Dunbar is, it's like he could tell the future. And what I mean by that is when I look at his old stuff, and he started one of the first group classes, off-leash group classes, like when I was born. And it was all positive reinforcement. So everything I did was about correction. Yeah, sure, we gave rewards for good behavior here and there, which were usually affection. I absolutely did not believe in food. Food was like for, basic stuff. But when it came to, getting the dog to focus on us, it would be a bribe. We wouldn't want to bribe the dog. If the dog is looking over there at someone in the distance, we leash check the dog to get the dog to look back at us. Everything was firm and don't you dare, and I'm the boss. And this was the mindset. Now, please, people who are listening to this who are dog trainers, I don't want, especially if you're a balance trainer or a 4-quadrant trainer or whatever alpha role trainer, whatever you go by, okay? This is not an attack. I'm just telling you my experience. So you might say that I don't use a prong or I don't do those things or I am less aversive or whatever the case might be. That's all good, okay? I'm just letting you know about my experience. People wanted to know how I was with the dogs, okay? So even with my own, I was quite aversive. So we were, it was about leash checks. It was about, so a leash check is basically, when your dog is doing something you don't want your dog to do, we have the leash on and we give them a good, nice yank. Okay. I mean, there's no other way to really describe it but that. Of course, sometimes the dog would scream because it would be, out of nowhere and the dog wouldn't expect it. This was kind of like the philosophy that we followed for everything. A Chihuahua or the dog was a Great Dane. I mean, maybe, I remember not necessarily applying the same force with the Chihuahua versus the Great Dane, but nonetheless, it was aversive. So for me, That's basically how I was trained when I first started. It was all about leash check, correct, show the dog what you don't want them to do. And if they happen to make a good choice, we were forcing them, then it would be like, a good job or whatever. And I did this for years. And I'll be really honest with you. See, this is where I think there's a lot of misconceptions here. It works. So I think that that's something important to just kind of hear me out on this. Okay. It works. That's not why I'm science-based. That's not why I'm positive reinforcement. Business that I created was off of not being a science-based dog trainer. My business grew and I got a reputation while being a balance trainer, while being an alpha role trainer. Okay. And so that doesn't happen unless there's results. So there was results. It's about how humane it was. It's about understanding that your dog is a sentient being, that they have feelings, that you're supposed to have a relationship. And it wasn't a relationship. It was more, you better act or else. And so I want you to understand that when people say, like, why doesn't aversive training work? It does work. I mean, that's why people use it. It's because it's popular. That's why there are so many amazing dog trainers out there, nominated balance trainers out there who will not or do not want to look the other way or evolve or see that there's something more. I think a big benefit for me was that I was always eager to learn and I was never settling. I find that when you settle and the businesses or the industry evolves, some people go with the industry and they follow what the research says or, the new and the now. And some people stay in the past because they get results. So I was getting results, and I could only say that when I was a balance trainer, it's probably been maybe 10 years where I started to notice certain things. And what I mean by that is I want to give you a great example. Okay. We have a dog who goes to see someone, let's say 3 times a week. Okay. The person puts the dog in the car. The owner puts the dog in the car, goes to this place, drops off the dog. All good. They do this 3 times a week. After only 1 week, they go to get the dog, to put the dog in the car. Dog has never had this problem. The dog is now fearful. And what I mean by fearful is the dog is shaking, drooling, nervous, distressed, does not want to get in the car. So they would call me up. I want you to pretend as if I'm that person that the owner is leaving their dog with. They call me up and they say, "Hey, did anything happen at when you've been watching my dog or when you've been working with my dog?" I'd say no. And this is genuine. Like, no, nothing happened. Oh, okay. Well, it's just because now my dog is like extremely nervous or extremely scared in the car. And so the first thing I would think of is, what is the owner doing wrong? Okay. This is my old life. What is the owner doing wrong? Oh, it must be this or it must be that. Not once did I ever think my corrections or what I do while the dog is with me, because this is how I train the dog. Not once did I ever think, oh, maybe the dog is stressed to come here because of how I'm treating him. No, instead, I think that it must be something that's going on at home. It has nothing to do with me. In fact, it doesn't even go into my head that that's a problem. Only now do I really see the big picture. Okay? So this dog is stressed, and I go to the person's home instead to work with the dog going in the car. And so I do my corrections. I reward a couple of times because the dog seems what I think to be calm. And then all is well. They say, oh, the dog is actually not too bad now. Like a little bit of drool, but the dog is a little bit better in the car. And so then, of course, all of a sudden I get a call, maybe, even 3 months later, and they say, I don't know what's going on. Have you been noticing the dog reacting when like with other dogs or people? And I say, absolutely not. The dog is great here. Oh, okay. Well, it's just kind of weird because things seem to be going, and once again, what do I think? Well, it must be the owner. Okay. And I'm not even saying that it's not the owner. What I am saying is that you have to understand, as a trainer, as a coach, you are programming not only the dog, but also the people, and you're getting them to do certain things. And there is, kickback here from what you're doing, whether it's good or whether it's bad. So long story short, a lot of these scenarios that were going on, I would look the other way and point my finger at that person or at the owner, or I would say, oh, it must be this or it must be that, because I believed in what I was doing so much that it was impossible for me to think that I stressed the dog out. When in reality, let's use the Josh version now and talk about that same situation. So someone calls me and says, since I've been bringing my dog to this place, I don't know what's going on. It's been only a week or 2 weeks. And now whenever I try to get the dog in the car, the dog is super stressed. Right away, I'm going to say, what are they doing with the dog over there? Do you have any videos? Do you know what they're doing? Blah, blah, blah. And then they'll tell me certain things like, oh, I'm working with, a trainer who believes in this. Right away, red flag. And I don't mean red flag because they're not going to get results. I don't mean red flag because they're a bad person. I don't mean red flag because of any of that. I'm just talking about the dog, okay? So the action of what they're doing, it is possible that now the dog is stressed by going into the car because the dog knows what's coming. Dogs pick up on patterns. If my dog doesn't take food, it is one big thing that I always tell people is that it could be stress related, and it usually is. Try having a piece of filet mignon while you're having a panic attack. It's not so easy. Okay, when you're distressed, we don't eat, or it's challenging to eat. Yes, I know there's disorders and there's all sorts of things that we could look at that but I'm just trying to give you like a generalization of this. Okay, so I tell them, why don't you just stop? Why don't you just stop going there? Figure out a different location or figure out a different place. Change it up. See what happens. A few weeks go by, they call me and they say, Josh, great news. The dog stopped. The dog is not stressed out anymore. And I say, okay, great. They tell me, but we decided to go back because we felt like the dog was, better. And now the dog is reacting the same way again. I mean, I don't know about you, but my mind is pretty clear about what's going on. Either there's something going on in there where the dog is becoming distressed, anxiety-ridden, fearful, whatever is happening, the emotions are not good emotions. And they're not feeling great. So the idea here is that the aversive methods that can be used can cause long-term side effects. And what we know for a fact is that they don't have to be used. And that, I think, is so important to understand. Okay? It doesn't mean that you have to be aversive. Okay? And while I was going through all of these emotions and learning and figuring things out, I had my own dogs. And I started realizing that I had Absolutely. I mean, anyone who knows me can vouch for me for this. I had one of the best dogs ever. Fully trained German Shepherd. She was the best. Her name was Daphne. I mean, it's probably how I became successful at the beginning of my business, is because of the fact that people would see her and they would just be in awe. They would be like, okay, I want my dog to have everything that dog has. That's a big reason to why things went so well. But here's the catch. I was using these aversive methods, e-collars. What else did I use with her? I used prongs at one time. And it was to the point, right, where I would say stuff like, which were true. Like I would never lie about anything, but it would be like, oh gosh, yeah. Like I used a choker, I used a prong, and like, it doesn't even matter anymore. Like the dog is like perfect, which was true. I could walk the dog off leash, prong, no prong. It didn't matter. All right. So the dog was trained, and the dog was well trained through a different approach, right? It wasn't science-based. It wasn't science-based. It wasn't positive reinforcement. It was a different way. But as I started to grow and evolve and listen a little bit more to the data, not theories, possibilities, data, research, I started to realize little things that started to pop up. For example, Daphne, the perfect dog, started to become reactive. Now I know what you're saying. Oh, Josh, that could be 5 million things. And you're absolutely right. But there's data that associates aversive methods with long-term side effects. Aggression towards dogs and people, among other things, stress-related anxiety, and so on and so forth. Okay? So, again, just so we're all on the same page, I'm not saying that these methods didn't work for Daphne. They worked very well. But I was creating more problems. And then I just want to also talk about relationship for a second. I didn't know what relationship was. I would talk about relationship like as if I knew what I was talking about, but there was no relationship. And I don't mean that I was lying. I in my head at the time, it's, you know what you know, right? So I believed that we had a relationship. She was scared to do anything without, checking in or this and that. People will say, oh, well, that's respect. It's not respect. It's fear. Okay? I don't want my son to be afraid of me. I don't want anyone to be afraid of me. I definitely want a passionate, great relationship with my dogs. I know some of you might be rolling your eyes, but listen, my dog started to become reactive. What did I do when my dog started to become reactive? I obviously became more reactive. So I went back to the prong, went back to the choker, went back to the e-collar, started to get results. But the long term started to get worse. So I was fixing something in the moment, but then when I wasn't involved or I didn't have the scenario in my favor, the dog would react. The dog would be with my my girlfriend at the time, and I would get a phone call that this happened. I'd be like, what? The best dog ever? The dog who, who's owned by Josh Taylor, dog trainer, blah, 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 whatever, that ego hit that I got, right, when I was younger, it blew my mind. And I realized through the research and through the data and through everything that I was going through that I needed to make change. That the reason why this dog was going downhill was because of me. So this is where I started to really dive deep into veterinarian behaviorists, where I started to really start applying into getting, I don't really, it's not something I advertise, but off the top of my head, I probably have like 8 or 9, maybe 10 different certificates, and they're generally all science-based. I paid lots of money to learn. I think it's so important that whoever you do deal with has some form of certification. I've just never felt the need to throw that out there towards people. I don't know. It's just how I am, I guess. So I started to apply myself. I started to learn. I started to watch Dr. Ian Dunbar, among others. Many, many different incredible positive reinforcement science-based dog trainers. It was always there. It was right there in front of me. But I had such great results, and the ego, like, no way, man. You couldn't tell me otherwise. Until it was my own dog. That was really, honestly, the only pinnacle moment for me. It was really just about my own dog, where I started to realize that this dog doesn't really have a relationship with me. She might sit next to me, and I'll pet her, and I love her, and this and that. But it's like walking on eggshells. It's not what you think. And it took a long time. And that might be my personal reason for why I got into this. But nonetheless, of why it happened or how it happened with Daphne, or maybe it's not even related. We can argue the fact that there's 5,000 other scenarios that could play into this, like who else was controlling the dog. Maybe they did something different, but it still doesn't matter in the sense that these methods caused long-term side effects. And there's so much proof to go along with that. When we talk about science-based and positive reinforcement, it's almost like now I really see the light. Like I really get it. People will look at positive reinforcement, especially people who use other methods, and they'll roll their eyes. I know this because I was one of them. I would roll my eyes. When people would talk to me about positive reinforcement, I would honestly laugh my ass off. Okay? Because it was, to me, it was complete mumbo jumbo. It was complete, I don't want to say lies, but it was like, no. I do good things. I fix problems. I know better. And this was all a big reality check for me. And I truly believe that it's part of the reason why, at least I feel like I'm quite humble. I have no problem having another dog trainer come and shadow me. I have people that come and shadow me all the time. I have people who've worked for me and then go start their own business. I have people that call me for advice for their dog training business, and I help them. I'm fine with doing these things. I've really come a long way to where I was. So I just want to let you know that it's not that the corrections and the aversive methods and the methodology doesn't work. It's about what is civilized, that you don't need to use it. And you might get, I think the draw in about it is that you can sometimes get these very instant results. I would get an instant result, and people would be floored, like, oh my gosh, he just did one correction and look how the dog is acting now. Like, wow, the dog is amazing. And that's how I literally felt inside. It wasn't a trick. You know what I mean? Like, it was really how I felt. The reality, though, it was not that. And the reality was that the dog was shut down. The dog was so stressed from what I was doing that the dog was shut down. And in that moment, the dog would react to nothing. It's like taking a dog who's afraid of water and shoving them into the tank. And then when they start swimming, someone will say, see, look, he figured it out. Naive. Okay? That's not how we do things. Okay? If I want to scare my child and have him not trust me and possibly have future problems, sure, I will throw him into every fearful situation that he gets into. I know this is a lot to take in, and there's a lot more that we can discuss. So, we are going to have people on the show who are balance trainers. And it's not about fighting. It's not about us bickering back and forth. It's about just understanding. And so we're going to have a lot more talks on the whole science-based positive reinforcement approach and even the other approaches. Okay. But I thought that it was very necessary to talk about this because a lot of people that come to me, either they have done no research, so they come to me and they don't know that we're science-based positive reinforcement, which is scary because if you're coming to me and you haven't done any research, what does that mean if you've done it before? Maybe your dog has been in a bad situation where he's getting leash checked or helicoptered or whatever scenario they might be using or method, where they're throwing chains at the dog or whatever the case, or even some who believe, by the way, that anxiety doesn't exist in dogs. Guys, I need you to pull up some info on your computer, okay? Like, I don't know, the American Vet Society, okay, for veterinarian behavioral, something, and look into some of these comments that you're making, okay? Anxiety does exist in dogs. They are sentient beings. They feel distress. If I can feel distress, then I can absolutely have anxiety. There are differences where many people will say, my dog has anxiety, and it's not anxiety, okay? It could be isolation. It could be, there's many forms and scenarios where it doesn't necessarily mean your dog has anxiety, but I want you to understand that we don't just make up this stuff, okay? Science-based means that there is data. That means that they take a certain amount of dogs trained this way, that way, and then they have the data that tells us things. So I have a few things that I pulled up here that I just wanted to read. Okay, and it's from the AVSAB. So that's the American Veterinarian Society of Animal Behavior. Okay, it's something that I think everyone should follow. And don't get me wrong, there's many other fantastic science-based professional sites out there, but I just wanted to read you a couple of things. Okay, so let's just talk about, for example, detrimental effects on animal welfare when it comes to aversive methods. These are all studies. You can find all of them online. Okay, you could go to the AVSAB site and you will see all of these, okay, and they're non-biased. All right. So in observational studies, dogs trained with aversive methods or tools showed stress-related behaviors during training. Included tense body, lower body posture, lip licking, tail lowering, lifting front leg, panting, yawning, and yelping. Now, obviously, we could say, oh, well, yelping never happened, but, or the tail lowering, but lip licking, panting. Some of these trainers or, just innocent dog owners, they have no idea that right then and there your dog is going through stress because of how you're doing things. So I want you to understand that it's a lot more than just an obvious tail under the legs or yelping, etc. What's important to hear, okay, is that dogs trained with reward-based methods showed increased attentiveness to their owner. You know how people always talk about how, they're not the most important thing on a walk? Which, listen, there's a lot of stuff going on out there. But the idea is that if your dog is distressed, you will see a lot less focus on you. And if you are using aversive methods, then that's why that can be one reason why your dog is not so focused. So I need you to remember that. So long-term effects. Survey studies have shown an association between the use of aversive training methods and long-term behavior problems, including aggressive behavior towards people and other dogs and anxiety-related behaviors such as avoidance, avoidance, and excitability. Survey studies cannot differentiate between correlation. So possible explanations for the association include: 1, aversive training methods directly cause or contribute to the development of behavior problems. Or number 2, the owners of dogs with problems are more likely to use aversive training. So regardless if they're most likely to use aversive training or you are using aversive training, because they can't make the correlation, nonetheless, regardless of the explanation, the association shows that aversive training methods are not effective in eliminating behavior problems. Okay? You are masking it. Okay? It's like flooding a dog. The dog is absolutely reactive and terrified around other dogs, and you flood the dog. You are just increasing stress and they shut down. People need to understand this. It took me forever. I would be laughing in myself's face right now hearing me talk. But this is reality. It's only a matter of time. So here's another one. Several studies show the effect of aversive training persists beyond the time of training. After dogs learn a cue taught using aversive training methods, they continued to show stress-related behaviors. When the cue was presented, the cue itself had become aversive. Let me give you a phenomenal example of this, okay? If your dog is looking at a dog outside, something I used to do, now your dog hasn't even reacted. Okay, you're just walking down the street, and we would say like, oh, well, the dog needs to focus on us. So me, as a balance trainer, I would leash check your dog, and the dog would look back over at me and give me eye contact. So what would that tell me? It would tell me that, oh, okay, great. So when I leash check my dog like this, I get them to focus back on me. They're understanding what I want. Wrong. What's happening is they're associating the stimulus, what they're looking at, with the leash yank as a negative. So what ends up happening is that whatever the stimulus is that I keep leash checking my dog with, they eventually look at that negatively. But see, it doesn't happen right away. Instead, you get eye contact. You get exactly what you want. So we feel like we're doing it right. But then what ends up happening is 3 months later, I get a phone call that all of a sudden my dog is now reactive to dogs when they once weren't, or they were, or it got worse, or whatever the case. The point is that is telling us right there that stress-related scenarios based off of the aversive methods we use can then trigger the stress just by that cue. Very important. Very important. And again, this is not philosophy. This is data, research, okay? Training effectiveness. Dogs trained with combination of rewards and aversive-based methods, often referred to in the industry as balanced dog trainers, produced lower obedience levels than reward-based, but better than exclusivity aversive-based training. So let me just repeat that. Dogs trained with a combination of rewards and aversive-based methods, which is a balanced trainer, okay, produced lower obedience levels than a reward-based, but better than exclusively aversive-based training. So people who used only aversive methods versus the balanced trainer, okay, the balanced trainer got better results. So think about that. Aversive training got the least amount of results for sit, let's just say. Balance training, where it was like not as aversive, mixed in with great job and a reward, got better results in the study. So what does that mean if you go another level over, where it's positive reinforcement? Enough said. So another thing they said, many methods of changing behavior in dogs are effective. And that's what I'm trying to say. Many methods of changing behavior in dogs are effective. However, The evidence based, from veterinarian behaviorists should be concerned not just with what is effective, but what does the least harm and produces the best long-term results. Okay? Long-term results. We are trying to cause, or we're trying to have no harm, the least harm. Like, it's very obvious what we're reading here, okay, about all of this. I promise we're almost done, okay? There is no, so this is something to go with the long-term side effects, okay? Creating positive associations to stimuli perceived by the dog as frightening is essential in easing fear and anxiety. Teaching new skills can build confidence. Right there, once again, in the studies, it was shown that when we used aversive methods where our dog was reactive towards something, which is generally fear-based, okay, it is not because they are overconfident, guys, okay? It is because it is fear-based. And when we would use positive associations with that stimuli, it would ease the fear and anxiety. It's about cortisol levels, okay? They know for a fact that when we either give them positive or negative, it increases cortisol levels. And cortisol levels are part of the stress bubble. Okay, but what we found out, what we figured out, okay, is that when we were using the aversive methods, the cortisol levels were much higher than that of the cortisol levels when we would be giving the positives and so on and so forth. So that tells us right then and there that we are stressing our dogs more when we are using the negative aversive methods, okay? In conclusion, based on current scientific evidence, okay, the AVSAB recommends that only reward-based training methods are used for all dog training, including treatment of behavior problems. Enough with the talk about how you have to punish and smack and do this to your dog or shock your dog in order for them to learn. That is not true. Can they learn? Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there are ways where you are causing less harm, okay? There are ways where you are causing less anxiety, less stress. So why not take that way? Why not go that way instead, right? Aversive training methods have a damaging effect on both animal welfare and human-animal bond. There is no evidence that aversive methods are more effective than reward-based methods in any context. So the research is not saying that aversive methods don't work, that yanking the dog and choking them or whatever, that it doesn't work. What they are saying is that it's not any better than reward-based training. I mean, explains so much for us, okay? And then one last thing, I promise, before we finish up, okay? If you're still wondering, what are some examples of reward-based training? Or what are some examples of, the techniques that should be avoided? Let me give you an idea of what they would deem as aversive. Choke chains, prongs, electric shock collars, intimidation, squirt bottles, shakers, noise cans, compressed air cans, shouting, staring, a forceful manipulation as alpha roles or dominance. Anything that involves these type of sayings, your dog is dominant, or your dog needs to follow a pack. These are generally aversive methods that will be used. Generally, I'm not saying everyone, but that's what I'm saying. Why should aversive training techniques be avoided? The consequences and fallout from aversive training methods have been proven and are well documented. These include increased anxiety and fear-related aggression, avoidance, and learned helplessness, guys, okay? What are some examples of techniques that may be used by a reward-based trainer? Trainers may be used verbal and visual cues to signal or request the required behavior. A clicker, verbal marker to mark the behavior. Toys, treats. It doesn't just mean that we use food all the time. Okay, that's not what we mean. We use whatever is going to help the dog learn. All right? We use primary reinforcers, stuff they love, comfort, affection, toys, food. It's not about bribing. Okay? It's about learning. We use stuff like capturing, shaping. There's so many things that we use. It's not just a one-dimension thing. I find that when I was a balance trainer, I thought we had so many different dimensions. You know, we use all the 4 quadrants. But the reality is that positive reinforcement uses other quadrants too. It's not just one thing and that's it, that's all. There's a lot to it. A lot to it. Okay? Does reward-based training mean that dogs are allowed to do unwanted behaviors? Use of reward-based methods does not mean dogs are allowed to do anything they want. All animals learn best when given appropriate structure, routine, and guidelines. However, it is imperative that these boundaries be taught without the use of fear and intimidation. Do I want my child to fear me, to teach them that they shouldn't be doing something? Whether it might be, I don't know, taking a candy from a friend without asking. Am I going to smack him? No. You know, people will always tell me like, oh, look, I put the shock collar on me and I zapped myself and it wasn't a big deal. So I'm sure it's not a big deal to my dog. You have to understand that your dog is not an adult human being. Yes, they are a sentient being, but what it means is that, you know what would be a better justification of putting the e-collar on? Put it on your 5-year-old child, which we always talk about how dogs are in that kind of toddler complex. Like that's like mentally where they are. Put your shock collar on your 5-year-old, put it at the highest setting, shock your child for no darn reason, and tell me that kid does not freak out. That would be, I think, a much better explanation of what to expect or how your dog feels when you're using something like this. Okay? So I'm very passionate about this. So as you can see, I finally have let loose a little bit in the sense of how I feel about going from the complete opposite spectrum to where I am now. I'm so proud of myself. I'm so proud of the people who were with me actually from back in the day, who have gotten, you know, new dogs because, you know, unfortunately they've passed away. The dogs have passed away or whatever the case might be. And they're with me still. And we use positive reinforcement and they see the difference. They see it in my face. They see it in their dog's face. Yes, I understand. We can argue the fact at the end of the day that they are just dogs. But, you know, at the end of the day, if they're just dogs, literally just dogs, why have them? Why have them? Right? They're with us because they're our companion. We love them. They love us. To some, they're our child. I use human analogies to go along with dog situations all the time. And people, you know, especially, you know, other trainers, especially balanced or alpha role trainers would laugh at that. But the reality is that they are just as close to us in many ways as a friend would be. And there are so many things that I haven't touched on about this, but we're already 46 minutes into our podcast here. So I think I'm going to end on that. I really hope that you see a little bit more about why positive reinforcement is so in the new now and why, or in the new, it's a long time coming, and why more and more trainers are aiming and focusing on that positive reinforcement. When I first started, even as a balanced trainer or an alpha role trainer, when I started, I had no one. I had no support system. Now there are so many support systems out there. I see, and I'm genuinely happy about this, I see 5, 6, 10, 15 new positive reinforcement dog trainers coming out of the woodworks every couple of months, from some of the local places that train dog trainers here in Montreal, my hats are off. Like I'm always open for any of these people to come and talk to me, or if they want to learn or guide in their evolution. I never stop, for the record. I still take courses to this day, and I absolutely love to learn. And I never truly believe that I know everything. I always think there's more, there's more, there's more. And I think that that's what keeps me on my toes. And I am so much more alive now in the sense of understanding that I don't know it all, and that there's always something else to learn. There's always another program to learn. So please do some research. Look into the AVSAB. Look into actual data about this stuff, and you'd be really surprised. I'm happy I made the switch. If you're a dog trainer, if you're not using positive reinforcement as your main tool, if you are not science-based, I want you to even take one client, a new client, and just do the complete opposite of what you do and go complete positive. All right? And if you want some help on that, hey, I'm here. I am absolutely 100% willing to actually help you with that. Okay? And I promise that you'll see something pretty amazing happen. All right? Thank you so much. Please, if you have anything you want to talk to me about, or if you want to be on our show when we start doing live calls, please email us, cepodcast@canineeducation.ca. All right? Thank you so much. I love all of you. And stay tuned for next week's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks. Bye.